If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum leadership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. I love Anchor because it's really easy to use, very accessible to record your podcast, and has excellent sound quality. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Hi, I'm Ever-Changing Butterfly, bringing to you Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge, where we'll discuss the challenges and triumphs of those with NLD. In today's podcast, I'll have my brother Jonathan reading Geoff's answers to the questions I asked him about his life with NLD. I will also be answering the questions that I asked Geoff. Also, we'll discuss the strengths and challenges of people with NLD, how that coincides with taxes and employers. So I will start off with having Geoff introduce himself.
Yes, hi, thank you. So my name is Geoff Hoppe, and I've written a couple times about my experiences with NLD before, so it's public knowledge. There's a few pieces that I've actually shared with you that you can link and share with your readers about my experience with how the work world, politics, and diversity perceive NLD. One of these was how I learned that corporate speak about inclusion is really just power politics, and the tagline for that is politically correct intolerance disdains actual diversity in the workplace. And then the second one is embrace neurodiversity in the workplace to meet your business needs. The introduction for this is actually sensible Americans know the moral and economic importance of workplace diversity. In this eye-opening and informative piece, Geoff Hoppe writes about a type of diversity whose value for business has surprisingly not been adequately recognized. Neurodiversity in particular, people with a condition known as nonverbal learning disability, NVLD, read, be enlightened, and act.
Thank you, Geoff, for answering that question and introducing yourself and giving our listeners stories that they can point to and possibly relate to also.
Sure.
When were you diagnosed with NLD?
So I had the diagnosis of ADD or ADHD for years. And started with ADHD and now NLD. I found out I had NLD at 34 years old after I got myself tested, and I'd struggled with organization and executive function for years. It got to be so bad, though, that I figured there had to be some explanation beyond I'm messy and random. So I shilled out the money to get tested, and voila, I found out that it was NLD. I had suspected before I had Asperger's.
Yeah, I can understand why you would have the previous diagnosis of ADD and ADHD, because people can think that since someone who has NLD processes things more slowly, that they are not paying attention. When in reality, they're just taking longer to absorb the information that they were just given to us. I was diagnosed with NLD at 19 by the Wright Institute in California. I did it because, like I have said in previous episodes, I had a burning hunch inside me that I was different from the rest of my family in some way. Apparently, I was right. So for you, Geoff, do you know what caused your NLD?
I'm pretty sure I was born with it. From what I've read, I think NLD is caused by a weaker or smaller splenium, among other biological and neurological factors. I try to keep up with academic research, but it's not easy to understand. Also, there's comparatively little of it. Either way, I've been the way I am for as long as I can remember. Thus, I guess my NLD is caused by whatever is physically, neurologically different about my brain.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that I got it from my dad's side of the family, because you can be born with it and it can be genetic. We don't know much about his family since he was adopted back when records weren't very good. I didn't know that a weaker, smaller splenium, which is the thick posterior part of the corpulus callosum, of the brain could cause NLD. I wish there was more research out there about NLD, but I do know that the NVLD project, which is a nonprofit, is researching it, so there should be some in the future, which will help people who have NLD and people who don't have it so that they can learn more about it.
Absolutely.
Yes. How do you feel about having it?
Frustrated, angry, different, isolated, special, and occasionally thankful. My feelings about my disability are a mixed bag. I'm frustrated more often than not. I know there are times my NLD has made me exceptionally good at what I do. However, those times are pretty rare lately. I'm fighting to get back into a position where my NLD can be as much of a strength as it has been a frustration.
I definitely can understand your mixed bag of feelings about having NLD. Right after I was diagnosed, I was relieved to have an answer to why so many things were challenging for me. But it does make things frustrating at times because I have to spend longer on completing tasks. I'm sorry that it seems like NLD is more frustration than a blessing for you presently.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. So, what differences or challenges do you struggle with?
Well, executive function, organization, inference, time management, and short-term memory are the big ones. I'm a big fan of Scott Belizico's characterization of NLD as trouble seeing how information fits together. If some task requires a big picture, holistic view, I'll probably struggle with it. I have a really tough time pivoting or changing plans. Once I decide how I'm going to do something, I don't really like pivoting away from that plan. For instance, I've been doing Instacart for money for a few months. It was very difficult for me at first. I wanted to get every item on my list one by one. When I get a list of things to do, I like to stick to that order and not change it. But I would save more time if I were willing to stop and say, hey, I could stop here and get item 17 on the list before I get item number 4, because I'm passing by where item 17 is. But to get myself to that point where I broke out of the strategy of getting items one at a time and not diverging from the list took a lot of work. It's possible though, but it does take a lot of work.
I also struggle with the big picture and a holistic view, as you called them. I tend to zero in on the small or tiny ladybug details rather than the big picture. Sometimes I do it so much that I have a tunnel vision and lose the big picture completely. I can relate to your example with Instacart when I try to multitask. Sometimes I wind up doing it slower than I would if I had done one task at a time. My other struggles are doing basic mental math, understanding body language, facial expressions, hand signals, executive functioning, critical thinking, and being able to understand what my tone of voice conveys to others. Does your family help you with those challenges?
Undoubtedly, constantly. Right now, I'm living with my parents because I can't find full-time work. I make money how I can, but I don't make enough to live on my own in this area. I live in Northern Virginia where the cost of living is just ridiculous.
I agree with you. My family constantly helps me too, and have ever since I was diagnosed. They help any way they can and that I need from them, which makes me extremely blessed to have their help. I know if I didn't have it, my life with NLD would be much harder than it is. I also live with my parents because of COVID-19 and it being easier for me to do because of NLD. Fortunately, I do have a full-time job because I'm working for my parents' nonprofit that my mom started and founded. I don't think I would make enough to live on my own without a higher paying job. Do you, do your family help alleviate the challenges, or do they make them worse?
They definitely help alleviate the challenges. If I had to worry about making rent every month, that would be a huge extra stressor.
Yes, I can understand why that would be. My family also alleviates the challenges by helping me with them. I would agree with you. If I had to worry about paying for things on my own, that would be a big stressor for me. They do try to help me learn how to manage my money by letting me be aware of what things cost. They also help me by reimbursing for things that they buy for me, like prescriptions. They also help me take care of my dog, and they don't have me pay for care for her care, but they may eventually have me do that to practice budgeting money. Are there gifts that you have from NLD?
Yes, I'm good with language, and I can hyper focus on things I'm interested in. I also have a great long-term memory, far better than most people I meet. I had a friend call me our walking encyclopedia once, and not to brag, but that kind of sums it up. I also notice things other people will overlook, thanks to the hyper focus.
I also have gifts from NLD. I've mentioned them in previous episodes, but if you need a refresher or are new to the podcast, they are a good auditory and verbal memory, recalling people's names, birthdays, and faces. I'm also good at remembering song lyrics, lines from videos or movies, and memorizing numbers. I'm not trying to brag either, but I would also probably be called a walking encyclopedia because I can remember family stories, odd facts about animals, and places we visited well. I tend to notice things people would overlook also because of being able to notice the small details rather than the big picture most of the time. Is there something you wish the world knew about NLD?
I wish the world knew what it was. I didn't even know what it was until I was diagnosed. Awareness isn't everything, but more awareness of NLD seems to me to be a necessary first step in a lot of us getting the help we need. When Chris Rock announced that he had NLD, I was thrilled. We finally have a recognizable face for this disability. I've talked with other NLDers, trying to think of other possible NLD people from history. I personally suspect Edgar Allan Poe may have had NLD. But having a famous contemporary is probably better for raising awareness.
I agree with you. I wish that more people knew what it was also. That's why I'm doing this podcast. I want to raise awareness about NLD, make NLDers know that they are not alone, and help inspire them to overcome the challenges they face as I have. I was thrilled too when Chris Rock announced that he had been diagnosed with NLD because then we know we now have our first famous, and at least to our knowledge, that first famous person that has it. Um, I'm not happy that he has it because it does have some aspects that make life more challenging. I agree with you that also having a contemporary example is better for raising awareness because then people will know who you're talking about. Everyone may not know who Edgar Allan Poe was.
Mm-hmm.
Do you ever wish you didn't have NLD?
I wish I was better at organization, executive function, and other things. I don't think there's a point in saying, I wish I didn't have it, because that will never be a possibility. It's sort of like saying, I wish I was taller, or I wish my eyes were a different color naturally.
Very true and wise. I would agree with you. Sometimes I wish something came more naturally to me, but that's why I work hard at my challenges so they are easier for me to deal with. You're right, we can't get rid of NLD, but at least we can try to make our life easier by working at our differences or challenges instead of doing nothing about them. I mean, if we didn't have NLD, we wouldn't have the gifts that we have. Do you ever feel like it is a burden?
There are definitely times when I do. My former employer used my NLD against me and backed me into a corner. My grad school advisors kicked me out because adapting to the symptoms and comorbidities of NLD was a nuisance to them. That's two major opportunities where my NLD was a factor. Though, to be accurate, the NLD was less the problem than my employers who were intolerant of neurodiversity.
I would agree with you that I do feel it is a burden when I feel like I have to work extra hard at something to make it easier. I'm sorry that your employer did that to you. They should have helped you, not backed you into a corner. NLD can actually make you good at some tasks at work. You can see things that others may overlook, like the small details. Or you may remember the conversations you have on the phone with people better than your fellow employees. Employers should try to embrace NLD and ask us how they can get us better at our job instead of making us feel incompetent. My parents help me by giving me constructive feedback on how I can improve on tasks that I do for them. What would you tell others who have NLD as motivation for when they get discouraged?
I would tell them that the world is designed by and for neurotypicals. The world isn't designed to break neurodiverse people, but often feels that way. Don't break. It's useful to find heroes or examples of people who refuse to budge, even when they're up against it. Stonewall Jackson is a hero of mine for that reason, along with the fact that I think he probably was on the spectrum.
Uh-oh. Oh, I had page flipped wrong. I agree that unfortunately the world is designed for people who have a brain that is wired the usual way, that is neurotypicals. The world would be easier for people like you and me to navigate if it were designed for neurodiverse people. Those are the ones who have learning disabilities or learning challenges. There are some agencies and companies that help people with NLD or ADHD or who are blind or in wheelchairs, but that's because they know what those things are. People don't know as much about NLD, so it's harder to help us. Once they know more, they can help us more. I would agree to keep trying to be a hero and inspire other neurodiverse people to do the same. We need more of us to encourage each other to keep spreading awareness and knowledge about NLD and other learning challenges that aren't well known.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or the ones that are invisible. What would you tell people who don't know they have NLD but suspect they might?
Read up on it as much as possible. The NVLD project is a good resource, especially the YouTube video interviews they do with NLD experts. Linda Carranzales is another good resource, as is her Facebook group, NVLD Pioneers. If you really think you might have NLD, it's worth it to get tested. That said, the testing is incredibly expensive. It was about $4,000 for me.
Wow, that is a lot of
Yeah.
money. I agree. It is a great idea to read up on it and get tested, even if it is expensive. It is definitely worth it. You're right. The NVLD project is a great resource with their YouTube interviews and stories on their website from people who have NLD sharing their experiences. Those are the stories that I use in my podcasts. I haven't heard of Linda before, but I will check her out. What are your challenges with taxes and how does it coincide with NLD?
As for taxes, the whole process is a nightmare for me. I'm not good at math or numbers, so that's one problem. I struggle with anxiety, so taxes also provoke the fear that I'll do something wrong or get into legal trouble. Also, the whole bureaucratic, multi-step nature of the process is a nightmare for an associative thinker like me. My mind is not designed to put one foot in front of the other or navigate multi-step bureaucratic processes. It's designed to make weird, random connections other people don't see. Their entire tax code feels like the government's attempt to punish neurodiverse people like me, frankly. Think about it. Once a year, you pay the state for the privilege of doing math, and there's a possibility you could go to jail if you screw it up. Oh, and the people spending the money may not be the people you voted for. And that's before we even get into, say, Thomas Jefferson's idea that it's unethical to spend tax dollars on something citizens disagree with. Given that I live in the ultra-liberal Fairfax County, Virginia, that's definitely the case for me.
I can understand how you feel about taxes because I'm not good with math either. So I have my older brother, Jonathan, help me with taxes. My brain isn't designed to do multitasking either. When I tried to do it, I often realized that I would be better getting one task done at a time, like I shared earlier in this episode. I was trying to think about what would be hard for one who has NLD when it comes to taxes or other things in life. The big picture that is behind tax, I think that thing would be trying to grasp the big picture that is behind taxes and other things in life, which is that it can help other people than just the ones who receive the benefits. It can help the whole economy if they are treated properly by having the correct tax brackets. So I would encourage you to try to train your mind to see the bigger picture of things like taxes more than you would naturally and normally. Once you do this, it will help you see it in other places that will be helpful for you. For instance, if you notice when people aren't helping someone out that fell off their bike, then you should decide to help them rather than being a bystander. If you do this, you can start a chain effect that could be spread to others around and spread more kindness out into the world. The other question I would add would be, what is the proudest accomplishment that you have, Geoff?
As for proudest accomplishment, it's probably the volunteering and services stuff I've done over the years. I don't look at a lot of things I've done as amazing accomplishments, but giving money to charities that need it, or doing other volunteer stuff, I look as concrete things I can be proud of.
So for me, I'm proud of being able to help children and young adults who have autism because of me having NLD. I can relate to how they feel. I know what it's like to have a brain that is wired differently, have things that are challenging in your life, and be discouraged when you don't have things come naturally to you. I also know what it's like to feel alone and like no one knows what NLD is or what learning challenge you have. By helping these people, I have been able to learn more things about myself that I don't do well when my employer doesn't know that I have a learning challenge because they can't adequately help me improve on my challenges. So my next job outside of working for my parents will be one where I can hopefully share my learning challenge with them. And that was the last question with Geoff. So I would like to thank him for letting me interview him today.
Thank you for having me.
All right.
Have you ever heard of nonverbal learning disability? Well, if you haven't, then step into my world. I will discuss topics such as dating, math, and body language. I hope you will learn what it's like to live with an invisible learning challenge by listening to this podcast.